I'd like to point out here that Mr. Memon is also a very senior advocate. Sir, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us here on CNN News 18. Sir, I'd like context from you here. We had the Congress's Udit Raj with us. He is still with us. His argument is, why did the Supreme Court take a look at this at all? This should not have fallen within their purview. He's also said that he thinks that what P. Chidambaram has argued should only be taken in P. Chidambaram's personal capacity as a lawyer and not as a representation of what the Congress has to say. Sir, do you agree? And what are your larger thoughts on what the Supreme Court has had to say?
You see, this is an important decision, of course, flowing from Supreme Court today after a lapse of 6 years, because what is being challenged is something which was implemented on the ground from 8th of November 2016. We have already traveled 6 years. And, you know, this a common man have become subject to this new policy of banning of certain notes and introduction of certain currency notes. Now, assuming, let us imagine that the Supreme Court had observed that the whole exercise is illegal, it is nullified, it would have created chaotic situation. How are you going to now undo what was done way back 6 years ago?
Right.
It was practically almost impossible. And therefore, Supreme Court, or for that matter, any authority that is expected to now help the normal working of the system of currency in our country, such a large country where 140 crore people are using currency day in, day out. How could you just say that we revert back to prior to 8th of November 2016? It is practically impossible. It would have created chaotic situation.
Mr. Memon, thank you for pointing that out. Just stay with us. We also have the BJP's Amit Malviya with us. Mr. Malviya, good morning. We've just shared with our audiences what the Supreme Court has had to say for agreeing. So it's a 4-1 verdict that is upholding the government's 2016 decision. Mr. Malviya, what is your response? All right, we don't seem to have Amit Malviya through with us. We'll try to reconnect with him in just a few minutes. Mr. Malviya, are you able to hear me? All right.
I can hear you.
All right. I was just asking you, sir, what is your first response to what the Supreme Court has had to say?
Well, the government of India is well within its right and within the constitutional framework to take important decisions and make policies on economic matters. And that is what it did during demonetization. The demonetization exercise in itself has had a far-ranging impact on India's formal economy. Over 5.5 lakh crore rupees have found their way to the formal economy. Today, billions of transactions happen over digital mediums, thereby incentivizing and rewarding those who are honest, who make an honest living, particularly the poor and the middle class. The only people affected by this decision were the corrupt, who made a lot of illegitimate wealth, had parked them in cash, and that is what the opposition was pitching for. So it clearly made a demarcation between those who are honest and those who are dishonest and corrupt. The opposition was seen siding with those who were corrupt. As far as the Supreme Court's judgment goes, it's also a message for the opposition that you cannot use the judiciary to settle political scores. The executive and the judiciary have their boundaries very clearly defined, and this was one such instance where the judiciary could not have faulted the central government for taking a decision by following all the process and rules. The opposition must realize that political issues must remain in the political realm.
Mr. Malviya, I want to come to you now with what the one dissenting judge, Justice Nagaratna, had to say. One of the prime points that she raised was that the Parliament can't be left aloof of such serious decisions. The Parliament is a miniature of the country. To that, sir, what do you have to say?
Look, I don't want to comment on specific observation made by a dissenting judge, but clearly there are certain policy matters that can be and are taken from time to time within the executive domain. If it's a policy matter, if it requires a legislation, then it will definitely be debated in the parliament. But if it's an executive decision, it can be taken by the executive of the country, and demonetization was one such decision.
All right. Amit Malviya with us from the BJP. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us. We had earlier the Congress's Udit Raj. After that, we've had the TMC's Majid Memon. And right now, the BJP's Amit Malviya bringing us their responses on this entire story. Now, we'll bring you more context on what the Supreme Court had to say and what each of the judges had to say. Remember, we've just read out to you parts of what the one dissenting judge, Justice B.V. Nagaratna, had to say. We've shared parts of what her judgment was. We will share more details with you in just a second. I will have a colleague join us to bring you more details of the entire decision. Now, apart from that, I do want to highlight some details. Then we'll go back to the case itself. This was a 5-judge constitution bench. It was headed by Justice S.A. Nazir. Now, the other members on the bench were Justices B.R. Gavai, B.V. Nagaratna, who importantly is the judge who has dissented, A.S. Bopanna and V. Ramasubramaniam. Now, I do want to say Justice B.R. Gavai and Justice B.V. Nagaratna had authored the 2 separate judgments. We've read out parts of what B.V. Nagaratna had to say already for you. Now, we'll bring you more details. The centre has argued so far, remember, in this case, the demonetisation was a well-considered decision. They've argued, as you just saw Amit Malviya from the BJP put forward, that demonetisation was part of a larger strategy to combat the menace of fake money. But on the other side, you had the former Union Minister, former Finance Minister, Senior Advocate P. Chidambaram. He was arguing of his own accord. He was arguing that the centre has not examined alternate methods to control fake currency or black money. He also said that the government cannot initiate any proposal on legal tender on its own. That's been the primary basis of his entire argument. He said that this entire set of changes should only have been done on the recommendation of the Central Board of the RBI. So remember, in the last few years, that has been the big question. What was the sequence of events? Who suggested to who? Was it indeed an RBI suggestion to the central government, or was it the other way around? Was it the central government that suggested to the RBI, as the opposition had alleged over the last few years? Now, obviously, the Supreme Court coming forward, making very clear that they side with the government on this. I'll formally state for you here what the Supreme Court had to say. The Supreme Court has said that it is not relevant whether the objective was achieved or not. They have upheld the government's demonetisation move. Now, Waris Pathan is with us. He is a senior leader. Good morning, sir. Thank you so much for joining us. Sir, we are reading out for our audiences. We are sharing with our audiences what the Supreme Court's 5-judge bench has had to say. One dissenting judge, 4 who upheld the decision. Sir, what is your response?
Well, I haven't read the judgment as yet. What I am coming to know is through your medium, only through the media, that the Supreme Court has upheld the judgment on the demonetization issue, and the 4 judges of the Honorable Supreme Court has agreed, and 1 is dissenting judgment. So I will be only able to comment once I read the judgment and see to it what is to be done, because the Supreme Court judgment, we all have to agree and abide by it.
Okay, all right.
What our thing was that the demonetization which was by the Honorable Prime Minister was without proper application of mind. I have stated so at that time.
Right.
Because the intention was to see that the terrorist activities are reduced, but we find that there's no reduction in the terrorist activities. It was held that the duplication of the notes won't be there, fake currencies won't be there, but we read in the newspaper every day that fake currencies are being seized.
Sir, quick
but
question
it won't be proper for me to...
Quick question to you, sir.
It won't be proper for me to comment on the judgment at present because I haven't read it.
Right. So, agreed. I just want to ask you a quick question. Since we know that the Supreme Court has upheld the decision, will we see the AIM allowing this issue to rest now, or will you make that decision once you read the judgment?
As I said, that I haven't read the judgment.
Okay, all right.
Unless and until I read the judgment, it won't be proper on my part to comment on upon it.
Okay, all right.